Hello, everyone. I see some names popping into the attendee list, so we'll wait just a few seconds for that to populate before we get started. My name is Devin Hunter. I'm an assistant professor of history at University of Illinois Springfield and the Illinois State Historical Society Symposium committee chair for this year. And it's my honor to welcome you to this live session of the symposium. In a second, I'll turn it over to my colleague Tim to introduce our guest. I just wanted to remind everyone that this is one of several sessions ongoing, some of which have already been recorded and are available on the Illinois State Historical Society YouTube channel. And for the live sessions upcoming, you can see those registration links on the ISHS website. I'll be linking to those things in the chat, so you can be sure and catch those as well. Also encourage you to look at the Historical Society website for other programs and ways to get involved, from becoming a member to donating to volunteering to the different projects we have going throughout the year. Throughout the session, you'll be able to ask questions, leave comments in the Q&A box, as well as in chat. And we'll do our best to keep an eye on those and find a time to address as many as we can. With that, I will turn it over to Dr. Tim Draper, Professor of History at Waubonsee Community College and ISHS board member.
Thank you, Devin. I know all of us appreciate the fine work that you've done, as well as the state historical staff in putting together the symposium. It's always a challenging task, especially I think now. We all look forward to maybe meeting together next year in person. My pleasure to introduce Morris Dino Robinson Jr. He is the founder and current executive director of the Shorefront Legacy Center. Shorefront collects, preserves, and educates people about Black history on Chicago's suburban North Shore. He is a graduate of Loyola University with a Bachelor's of Arts in Communication Design and a minor in African American Studies. Outside of his career in advertising and design, his avocation with the creation of Shorefront began in 1995 and has since accumulated over 350 linear feet of archival material illustrating the lives and experiences of Blacks on the North Shore for public use. He is the author of 3 books: Through the Eyes of Us, 1997, Gatherings, the History and Activities of the Emerson Street Branch YMCA, 2004, and A Place We Can Call Our Home, revised 2014. Through Shorefront, he has engaged the local community, preserving its history through articles and oral history, provided resources for public use, participated in dozens of lectures on the topics of the importance of community-based archives and local history. Dino is currently production manager at Northwestern University Press. Welcome, Dino. We look forward to your presentation.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Devin, for having me today. And thank you, audience, for attending and signing in on this. I'm going to shortly share with you a screen with a PowerPoint presentation. I'm going to try and keep this to about 40 minutes and then leave room for Q&A afterwards. I believe participants have access to Q&A and chat. Feel free to leave questions and comments in those, and I'll try and view those as I'm presenting. And we'll either incorporate them into the presentation or stop and answer them where it's appropriate to do so. And there'll also be some time afterwards in the end. So again, thank you for having me today. I'm going to share screen. And I hope everybody can see what I have here. And I have my Q&A panel open as well. So that is what I'll probably see first. I probably will see that other than the chat. So keep that in mind as you pose questions. So again, my name is Dino Robinson, and thank you for having me here today. And I want to talk to you a little bit about 2 things, a Shorefront, and I'll share some historical things that we do through examples that encompasses the local Black community on Chicago's suburban North Shore. Shorefront began 25 years ago, and it started with an initial individual initiative in 1995 just to explore why there isn't a bigger representation of the Black experience in the suburban North Shore. Usually what happens when historians talk about Chicago metropolitan area Black communities, it tends to focus primarily on the south side of Chicago and the history around that. But you know, history shows that there's been a population throughout the Chicago metropolitan area as long or even longer in the surrounding area. And the North Shore had very little about that, other than being tagged as domestics and servants, and we go to church. That was pretty much the entire history of Blacks on the North Shore, spanning over 150 years. And what we want to do is showcase that there was a lot more to it and a lot more complexities involved with that, and interactivity within Chicago, greater Chicago metropolitan area. So my work started as the individual work in my basement, where I'm actually sitting in the room where it started, and then grew to move to one location in the former de facto segregated school, and then now in the lower level of Sherman United Methodist Church, where we're housed today. The territory that we cover is, you know, hence the name of our organization, Shorefront, are the suburban communities along Lake Michigan, north of Chicago, Evanston, north to Lake Forest, with specific interest in Evanston because of its long history of the African-American community, Glencoe, and Lake Forest as well, also for its long history of African-American presence. And kind of set the tone of like population growth and establishment. Lake Forest, who's known as being this very wealthy white suburban community, had early African-American presence as early as 1850. Its first Black church was established in 1860 in Lake Forest, Illinois. So Highwood, Highland Park, Winnetka, Kenilworth, we do also cover, but some of these communities have smaller populations other than Highland Park, and Highwood has a growing population, which we're monitoring. Kenilworth consistently has the smallest population with just 4, and I'll show you that with this graph here, and why we tend to focus on these communities. Evanston and Glencoe, Lake Forest, the long-term stable community that's been there for multiple generations. And then the 4 remaining suburban areas that have a combined population of 750. And as I stated before, Kenilworth has a Black population now of 4 members. I think at its height, it was 7, and that was in 2000. Its first Black residents bought a home there in 1960. Before that, Kenilworth historically has been established and founded as a sundown town, not allowing Blacks to live in Kenilworth. And some of the reasons why we started doing this were from multiple questions. You know, as why we did it, and when we started doing it, some of the challenges that we had. You know, why are you doing this? What do you know about our history? And you're not from here. I am a transplant into the North Shore. Even though I've lived here now for 40 years, I came here with my family in 1980. And the culture in the North Shore, especially within the Black community, is that you're a newcomer unless you've been here for at least 25 years. Or when the seniors are calling you newcomer, die off, and then you become the old timer, where you're talking about other newcomers coming in. You're not from here. But that is an interesting dynamic because it sets some challenges where you can either gain information and gain trust, or where you're excluded from that, and then how long it actually takes to gain that respect. And I'll circle back to that later on, especially throughout this program, as to why what we do and how Shorefront operates. It's really community driven. And we want to make sure that the community knows and understands that they own this history, they own their narrative. And we exemplify that by doing a few things here within the community. One thing that we do, we're active collectors. We move in and out of the community. We don't always want to run a program. We want to be involved in some way. And sometimes we just want to participate. We want to observe. So we capture the whole truistic experience of Black life in the North Shore, and not be the leading cause of this, but more of a documentary type of approach. But a lot of times we also go in and talk to people like artist Blim Blount, who is a local print letterpress artist, but also does a lot of stuff with civil rights and equity and advocacy in his community. So a lot of his prints reflect what he does with that. So I was there one day talking to him as he was demonstrating his print process and some of the goals and aspirations that he had. He's a recent Evanston resident, coming from Detroit, but he learned that his grandmother lived in Evanston, was born and raised in Evanston. So he's returning to his, quote unquote, ancestral home and participating in community. Another thing that we do in the community is a series of lectures, public facing usually. And in this particular one, Black Evanston History Makers, we kind of combine two people, one senior, one youth, to talk about their experience growing up in the North Shore, what they do and what they dream to become and who their role models are. And this is an open forum that is recorded, audio recorded. And it's we usually have a live audience of around 20 to 30 people inside City Hall's second floor gallery room. So we want to make this open process and very engaging and very homely. We also celebrate people who have done some significant things in the community. And one of them we did was a honorary street naming for actress Tina Lifford, who now performs the character on TV's, own TV's Queen Sugar. Actress Tina Lifford has performed in over 100 movies and plays and TV shows. But it wasn't until Queen Sugar that she kind of re-emerged in the forefront of her acting career. And we wanted to honor her because she grew up in Evanston, and her first stint in acting was at her former grammar school, Foster School. And we're staying on the front of her home where she was born. We also address current issues with things that we're doing now in the North Shore. And one in particular in Evanston was dealing with redlining and reparations. And Evanston Shorefront have played a big part in helping to work with the community with guiding these historic narratives. And then lastly, we bring in families, multi-generational families to Shorefront to share their history. And a lot of times I end up donating archives and items to Shorefront so future generations can see here. So at this table, we have 3 generations. The senior of the household, his son sitting about 2 seats away, and his grandchildren around there with all the artifacts that they've donated over the years, so their grandchildren can now come back and see what their family legacy is about. The children and the grandchildren now live out of state in Washington, so coming back to Evanston to see this and see the lineage is a treat for them, and they spend a considerable time at Shorefront doing that. So we really work hard at engaging with the community because it's important for us to build those relationships. And those relationships are long-lasting relationships. It's not one of these things that we have an idea, we identify people, we contact them, we extract information from, we create an exhibit, and then we leave and never hear from them again. Many of these families we are still constantly engaged with to this day over a variety of things. And we always go back to them for more information or supply them with information. In this last photograph you see here in this slide, you see a woman looking at a scrapbook that was donated from another person in Evanston. But there happened to be an article about her in there as a young girl. She's right here in this picture right there. And this was a singing group that she was in called the Darnells. And they were almost signed to Chess Records in Chicago. And this is when they were in high school, senior year in high school. And at that time period, the only reason why they did not sign that deal is because 3 of them graduated from high school and married immediately. One relocated to California and the other stayed here in Evanston. So that was the end of their singing career. They hit one little record, made it big in the Chicago area, and then after that, they disbanded. But for her to see the scrapbook and see her memory there, she started talking about that, remembering what was going on at that time period and the stories behind that. So it was a wonderful engagement experience where I'm always constantly coming back to her for more information and for her to educate me and for me to educate her about our combined local history. And one other way of illustrating this is a project I worked on in early 2000. Was a music exhibit. And it was an engagement where I had to find a person in Evanston. And I was asking everybody in Evanston, where is this person? And so after a while, after about a year of looking, I finally got a hold of one of her sisters, the person I was looking for, her sister. And I started calling that number to ask for her sister so I can contact this person. And on one of my last calls, she stated to me that, look, if you're a solicitor, I recognize your voice. If you're a solicitor, we don't need to speak. And I knew I had about exactly 15 seconds to try and engage her in a way where she will not hang up on me thinking that I'm a solicitor. And I did it, and I was able to do so. And then she said, well, I'm Patty. And I knew I had exactly 15 seconds to gain her trust in this whole process. Patty Drew was a singer. In David Pruder's book, Chicago Doo-Wop, she is defined as like the impetus and the definition of the birth of soul music because of the music that she was doing as an Evanston resident. She signed with Capitol Records, first with Chess Records, part of a group called the Druvels, the female counterpoint to the Duvals. They were both doo-wop groups, but Capitol Records later signed her as a solo artist to produce multiple albums and 45s. And she was set to tour with James Brown, where the music industry at that time was not conducive for her personality, and she got out of it as soon as she could and came back home, sang locally, and then retired from that. But from then on, her career path was not that glamorous. She has no rights and receives no royalties to her music, nor does she have any memorabilia in her work. So I set out to look for some of the things that she's done, that she has done. And I was able to find and locate 45s and albums. But specifically, I was able to find that she performed on American Bandstand. And this is part of her performance. So in showing this to her, I mean, she never saw herself perform live on any platform. So for her to see that in front of her grandkids was a memorable experience. To this day, their family always talk about the day I came over with this video to show the complete video of her on American Bandstand and being interviewed afterwards by Dick Clark. So that was a wonderful experience to kind of showcase that with her. So with Shorefront, over time, we've developed a huge collection of archives, video and audio, publications and exhibits, and we perform lectures and exhibitions, other events. And people and students also come down to the Legacy Center to do research. And actually historians from across the country have come into Shorefront to do research on a variety of projects. And with our resources, we had to develop a website to help accommodate some of the things that the community are looking for. So we want to be a resource where people can come and visit, but also find things online that they can use. So on our website, we have our finding aids on our homepage. We also have a journal page that is open for the community to contribute articles to, and we publish those, the collection of the articles at the end of the year. We also have a audio history site called Shorefront Voice. And this was something that was supported by a grant by the Illinois State Historical Records Advisory Board. This is a project we did a couple of years ago, but these, the first 37 audio things that we have on there right now are done from interviews that I produced between 1995 and 2000 for the most of them. And as far as our holdings in our collection, we have over 350 linear feet of archival material that encompasses photographs. I think we have over 1,500 photographs, and then from some two private collections, especially from Larry Brooks, who was a professional commercial photographer. We have his entire collection, including a documentary film he did on the desegregation of Foster School. So we have his original reels and his original videos and his negatives and prints from his collection throughout his career. We have about 700 library books. It's a non-circulating library, so all the books are used within house. I think since then we've collected over 300 more books since that time we had that process. And we have over 100 audio hours and probably 30 video hours of footage, historical footages that represent the Black community in the North Shore. The Shorefront Voice site not only has the audio recording, but it also has a PDF transcript that you can read along while you're listening to the audio, as well as the metadata that's tied to it as well. Again, we started a a publishing arm, where we take a lot of selected work that we have researched and create publications out of that. And two that are sampled here. One is the political life of Elvin B. Jourdain Jr., who was Evanston's first Black alderman, serving starting in 1931 through 1947. And what he did in the early stages of fighting Jim Crowing and segregated practices in Evanston. And also throughout, Illinois and the Chicago metro area, and his engagement with the Illinois chapter in NAACP that his father helped start along with W.B. Du Bois. Before the NAACP started, it was known as the Niagara Movement, and Elvin Jourdain Jr.'s father was part of that Niagara Movement that helped facilitate and formulated the NAACP. Now, there is a historical picture of W.B. Du Bois with the group of the members of the Niagara Movement. The only missing person in that picture is Elvin B. Jourdain Sr., who had to leave 2 hours prior to that shot to get back to handle a client in New Bedford, Massachusetts, because he was serving as an attorney. And so he missed out of that historic photograph. So there's no photograph of him at any of these things except in the original program, where he is the opening ceremony and moderator for the first installment of the Niagara Movement. The book next to it is one of our journals that we do on an annual basis. This is combined articles from our publication online that gets over 750 visits per month now. And the comments are open for people to comment on. One fun thing that we did was a documentary on Evanston's first African-American mayor, Lorraine H. Morton. And that was done over a course of 4 years.
Lorraine Morton lived
and
a
this video will kind of
purposeful
explain
life,
that.
accomplishing many firsts. She made Evanston her home after graduating Northwestern University and became the first educator of color to teach in a public school there. Over the years, she went from principal to alderman to...
Uh-oh. I think some of the sound has gone out. I do apologize for that. So pause and play it.
It says Morton never...
I do apologize. We can't hear the sound that is probably on my streaming end, but this was aired on Channel 7 News during Black History
the
Month.
Civic Center after her.
And I was just talking about how this film was produced with trying to just get her story down. But in the end, getting enough information to create a documentary film about her, a 45-minute documentary film on her. And surrounding her is her extended family, especially these first 2 rows. Her daughter, granddaughters to the side here, and extended family members, generational members in the background here. And then the rest of the city employees and staff members and friends and family in the background at the opening screening of her film. She's seated there, she's 99 years old. And 3 months after this screening, she passed. So one of her last words to me at this event was, this film is wonderful, and I think my job now is complete. I am done. That hit hard for us because we knew that we put a lot of work in with this, but we were really gratiated with her presence because her acknowledgement and stamp of approval on this really meant a lot for Shorefront, that we did things right and engaging the community and engaging the family and creating something that's memorable and historic. One other project we did in Evanston was developing a historic heritage site program. And this wasn't the first time this was tried or attempted in Evanston. And it started in 1995 through the work of then Alderman Joseph Kent, who developed this organization called PITCH, Preserving Integrity Through Culture and History. And it happened during the 1996 National Trust for Historic Preservation bus tour throughout Evanston to showcase the historic Black districts in Evanston. And I'm here in the background as one of the facilitators and early bus tour guides in there that helped facilitate this project. The end results of PITCH, they developed a report and a plan to the Evanston Historic Preservation Commission, but then later was shelved because they didn't know what to do with it afterwards or how to advance it even further. So flash forward, to present time, I was able, with the current alderman, Robin Ruth Simmons, who wanted to try and make a historic preservation district and wanted to know where to start. And I kind of shared with her that the work was already done. It's a matter of dusting off the report, reformulating, and making it a way that can work for the community in a quick and easy way. And so what we started doing with the Preservation Commission is we identify areas that need to be addressed that honors the Evanston's Black community. And then also take it further into the northern suburbs and other communities as a model. And with that, we knew there were like 3 or 4 locations, but throughout Evanston. So we didn't want to designate like one area as the 5th Ward as the place to look for Black history, but remind people that throughout Evanston, there was a Black presence throughout all of Evanston. And so we took that into consideration and revamped that to focus not just inside the 5th Ward, which is that shadowed area that I have there, but to expand it further and incorporate more of the area of Evanston. And so we took that and we generated a report and a proposal to the Preservation Council, who then tasked me to write out a resolution, which I did, and then present it to the Preservation Commission, who signed off on it, and then presented to the city of Evanston, which then became an official resolution 54R20, designating the Afro-American Heritage Site Program as a product of Shorefront that will go on indefinitely. What's cool about this is that we are looking at ways to have the community engaged in designating sites throughout Evanston. Through an application program and a review program that's guided and guided by the Black community. With this first process, we identified 8 properties. And with that, the announcement went out in our local newspapers. Daily Northwestern published a series of articles on each site, interviewing members of residents of those homes or property owners. And the Evanston Roundtable and Evanston Now and Evanston Review also picked up on these articles as well. At the same time as these articles were going, we convened a committee to look at what was needed for designation. And we started looking at ways to mark the properties. And we didn't want like a big kiosk sign in front of properties because we find that maybe residents may not want that on their property, but something that's not that's more unobtrusive. So we looked at sidewalk markers, metallic medallions that are embedded in the sidewalk in front of the properties. And so we kind of based it off the top row here of some things that we saw in other places of the country. And we designed our own here. Excuse me, I just lost my screen here and I gotta get back to it. What did I do? There we go, sorry about that. So from here, this was the final heritage marker that we designed. And it's gonna be a cast metal marker about 4 inches in diameter that's embedded in the sidewalk. We'll also have a website a freestanding kiosk, wayfinding sign in public parks, so that as these sites grow, people would do either self-guided tours or go on the site and look for the tours and read up more on it, and have some other visual identifiers that they use on their smartphones and other materials that are available. So we hope to have installed at one, in the coming years, up to about 50 sites throughout all of Evanston. And lastly, in regards to this whole process, this is advised through a committee from the community with very basic questions that help support why a site should be nominated. And then it goes in front of another committee from the community that will make judgments and select up to 5 sites per year to designate as historic sites and have the medallion marker implanted in the sidewalk in front of the properties. So we're looking forward to that. And in answer to Catherine Harris's question, isn't Evanston one of the cities that's promoting reparations? Yes, we are. And this was a really big project that we did not know that was coming. And Shorefront got involved in this because the city of Evanston asked us a specific question. What has Evanston done that has harmed the Black community with policies or practices in any way that would support local reparations? And we were able to do that. So as a chain of events of how this kind of came to be, there was an automatic resolution, R43R02 in June 2002, done by former second ward alderman Lionel John Baptiste for the city of Evanston to support HR 40, that's at the federal government, that talks about and addresses the study of national reparations and what's needed. The city got fully behind that and was surrounded by an open talk forum with scholars, historians, and community members talking about supporting HR 40. In 2019, the Equity and Empowerment Commission commissioned the undesigned redline exhibit to be housed to be displayed at the City Hall. And at the same time, the Equity and Empowerment Commission asked Shorefront to do an exhibit on localized redlining. And I reproduced that, which really was an eye-opener for a lot of Evanston residents of how they played a part in this whole systemic racism that was happening throughout the country, that Evanston also played that part. Evanston always touted themselves as being a diverse and welcoming community, but never addressing the past egregiousness that had happened in the past. And now they're starting to look at that and look at it. November 2009, Resolution 126R19, supported by 5th Ward Alderman Robert Louis Simmons, to use the sales tax of local recreational marijuana to support local reparations with a total goal of $10 million. And then the last automatic resolution, March 22nd, 2021, just passed, that designates the first 4% of that funds to go toward a housing initiative. And all that came to be, and this is the resolution that focuses on what the key things that the city of Evanston is focused on: housing assistance and relief, economic initiatives, and educational initiatives. And one of the first programs they brought out was a housing assistance. And this involves a $25,000 grant to family members that can prove their harm. And the bar of proving that is pretty easy, actually. Just show that you were a resident or a family member was resident between 1919 and 1969, and you're part of the program. So that's the first part. What the city of Evanston asked us to do was to show why this happened, and they tasked Shorefront to come up with a report. And we did a rough draft report, which was about 16 pages, but then it grew about a month after that to a 75-page report documenting policies and practices that affected the Black community with examples. And you can find those, again, just kind of illustrate this. This is the red line map that I showed them that are directly overlaid the 5th Ward. The red area here is the historic 5th Ward neighborhood, where the entire Black community was pushed into that area through racialized housing practices, redlining, and zoning policies that pushed that Black community there. And since then, the area there has been dezoned, where their banks and development would not happen in that area, thus painting a picture of a deprived area that has not seen the development that's needed in in Evanston. That still has a spillover effect to this day. Right now, the Fifth Ward does not have a neighborhood school, and the students, the youth in that area are bussed out to 5 different school districts, which thus then broke up the PTA in the local school there. The local school at the time was Foster School that was located there. But right now you can see how areas are just broken up into different areas. So this small area here, Willard, all the way over here, Lincolnwood here. Then you have Kingsley, Orrington, and Walker as well. So that really still has a long-term effect on the city of Evanston Black residents that the city is trying to rectify now through work toward reparations. This is a part of the report. You can download it at the city of Evanston. If you go to that website address down there, it's a downloadable PDF, 75 pages. And we've actually recently done an update that we plan on uploading at the end of May that includes a lot of societal type issues that also impacted the Black community, the perception of the Black community, how it's portrayed. And we found articles and advertisements and bill plays of, plays in blackface. Come and see the Pickaninnies sing and dance and sing old slave time songs. So those things were part of the whole culture of racialized discrimination in Evanston that the city of Evanston is addressing. And our report helps spell all of that out and helps defend why localized reparations were needed. Is the current Lorraine Morton Civic Center the site of a former school? Yes, it was. It was a girls' school run by I think it was a private religious-based girls' school. And then when it closed down, it was transformed into the city hall. Morton, where she first taught, was at Foster School that was later closed down in the middle of the Fifth Ward. She later became the first Black teacher, though, to teach outside of Foster School. Her first teaching stint at Nichols Middle School, then later at Chute, and then principal over at Haven School. So in wrapping up this presentation, some of the rules of engagement that we always participate in, we engage in the community, is always introducing ourselves. Not what our entity is, not what our degree is, not what our profession is, who we are as a person, who our family is, why we live here, why we're engaged, why we're asking them questions. We want to make sure and show that we are dependent on the entire community to share its collective history, because not one of us knows all the history. It takes a community to assemble this. We're always asking permission from the community to do big projects, to make sure we're doing the right thing, to make sure it is appropriate for the community and the community is comfortable with that. We're also charged with protecting their legacy. So whatever we do, we keep in that eye frame that we are protecting family legacies and family stories. And sometimes, because we're so intimately engaged with them, we're protecting family secrets. We want to make sure as we talk with people, especially in the North Shore, where, if you heard the term 6 degrees of separation, well, in this North Shore, it's like half a degree of separation. You can talk to one person and know pretty much everybody in the community through that one person, because we're all connected in that way. When we do projects and we have products that come out of that, we give copies of those outcomes to the participants that helped us make that happen. And our follow-up is always continual. So when I talked about Patty Drew, we're still in contact with her today, even though I interviewed her over 20 years ago. I still talk to her and her families to this day. Members of the board of Shorefront and volunteers still engage with family members that have participated in building's local history. And we find that important and engaging because they then start becoming the historian and the collector for Shorefront. Just before this presentation, I got off the phone with a community member who's a member of the Women's Auxiliary of the VFW, who's coming over next week, donating a large collection of VFW memorabilia throughout the history and legacy of their organization that spans over 70 years. We couldn't do that if we were not following our rules of engagement. And this woman here understood that, and the first person she knew to call was Shorefront, to make sure that we had these things in hand. And we look forward to processing that as fast as possible and putting out an exhibit that showcases that. So with that end, I thank you so much for your time and attention. And I would love to I'll stop sharing, and I would love to entertain any questions. Either in the Q&A or in the chat.
Looks like there's one in the, just came up in the chat there for the panelists.
Yes, I see. Would heritage site markers also be placed where homes of Black community members were destroyed or picked up and moved, i.e. from the lakefront to the Fifth Ward? This seems to be one way to honor the families who were there before they were forced out. Absolutely, yes. And I think that's why we called it sites, because some of the places that we did designate are no longer there. One, for example, the original location of Ebenezer AME Church in Evanston that was established in 1882 is now the site of a high-rise. And so we want to make sure we identify that that's where the original location of the church was. Also, there are some sites near the lakefront on Dempster Street, just west of Forest Avenue. And the homes are still there. Some of the homes are still there, but it's fastly being developed. But we want to make sure that people knew on that block, there was not only just a Black presence, but a small Black community living in that area. And so we're capturing these areas as we grow them and grow the sites. And as we discover these new sites, we want to make sure that is marked, mapped, and written about. So thank you so much for that question, Rena. What kinds of info do we have on Black residents in the 1850s? Well, that's kind of easy to do because I think we only have two individuals at the time, Maria Murray and Hetty Corn. Now, Maria Murray, we do have some information on, but Hetty Corn, we have virtually none other than she was the domestic servant for Philo Judson. There's a street named Judson Avenue after Philo Judson, and she was a housemaid for that. Now, what we think is that she did move somewhere else in Evanston, probably married, changed her name, and that's where we lost track. And so we're still looking for Hetty Corn. But Maria Murray, we do know that she did live on Dempster Street, just in that one market I was telling you about, just west of Forest Avenue. That was her home there, along with her husband, George Robinson. They did not have any kids, but her history was pretty interesting, knowing that she was purchased out of slavery, then moved to West Virginia, and then moved to Evanston with the family that she was working for. The state of Illinois at the time did not allow free Blacks to live in Illinois. You had to be indentured to a family. So Maria Murray was indentured to the Allen Vane family and worked for that family until her death in 1899. George Robinson lived on to 1911 in that same house on Dempster, just west of Forest. So yes, some of these stories, we're getting some really interesting stories. Others that we're still looking into. One is Nellie Crawford, who went by the stage name of Madame Sul T. Wan, who was a professional extra in movies when she moved out to California. She lived here in Evanston for a short time, had 3 boys here in Evanston before she moved to California. And one of her big roles was performing in the film Birth of a Nation. One of her last roles that she played in was Carmen. And she played the lead role's grandmother in that movie, and I think that was her last film. But she went under the title Madame Sul T. Wan. Her son, Onis Crawford, performed also as an extra in a lot of 1930s and 40s films, usually in those scenes where you have a big crowd of, say, Africans trudging through the jungle. He was one of those Africans carrying artifacts through those jungle scenes. So that was his full-time gig doing that. And another story that we have been following was, oh gosh, what is her name again now? Dorothy Hadley, who was graduated from Howard University after she left Evanston and stayed and worked there in the registry department, where she met Dr. Malaku Bayan, who was finishing up his PhD, becoming a physician, but his role was with his uncle, King Haile Selassie in Ethiopia. So Dorothy Hadley, Dr. Malaku Bayan married. she became an ambassador and a war correspondent during the Italian-Ethiopian War. And so she had offices here in Chicago, New York, and in London. Her husband and her developed the Ethiopian World Federation and the Ethiopian Star newspaper, which still exists today in New York. It was started by her and her husband. But to show that sense of royalty, and some of her papers are now at, Yale University, where she has open letters that she's been writing to her sisters here in Evanston about what it's like to meet and engage with and talk with the Queen and the King. And they had both had children at the same age. They played together. So having these interesting storylines along here and developing these stories and bringing them out to focus is a true benefit of what Shorefront is trying to do with Evanston, with localized Black history. So the last question I see on here is if people want to make a donation to go toward the heritage markers, yes, go to the Shorefront Legacy website. You see a donation button there. It'll take you to a donation page. Use PayPal with that. And you could donate through there, and you can designate in the note what it's to go to. But fortunately, so you know this, the Heritage Marker program was an exciting program that excited a very specific foundation, along with our work with what we're doing with reparations. And that was the Mellon Foundation. And once they learned that we applied for a grant from them, not only were they excited that we applied, they want to award us, but they doubled the award based on the strength of our application. So we're funded for that. So we're happy about that. But yes, of course, we could always use more donations because there are so many more projects that we're working on, including the early beginnings of a new documentary film that we'd like to address on the history of the de facto segregated school, foster school here in Evanston, of its birth, how it became a de facto segregated school, and its ultimate closing. And its birth from there become a magnet school known as King Lab that exists today. So we have historical footage in 1967 that one of our interviews that we did, Larry Brooks, incorporating his film, with some interviews that we did 4 years ago with a foster school reunion kindergarten class that birthed the birth of King Lab, and then other conversations of now about taking that school and turning it into a STEM school for future generations. So we think this will be an interesting film project to work on, but you know, we have to get the funds first to see it through. Thank you for that. And thank you for that time that you're giving me on this. If you have any other further questions, feel free to reach out to me, shorefront@me.com. Either myself or a board president will answer your questions. And feel free to, especially when the pandemic subsides and you're in the Evanston area, feel free to come by Shorefront and see what we have in our holdings. We are usually there on Saturdays from 10 to 2 and weekdays by appointment. So I think with that, are there any other questions, or I think there's some more in Q&A.
Yeah, it looks like there's a handful there in the Q&A box. Maybe Tim want to pick up a couple of those.
Let's see,
Sure.
Okay, Kate Garrett, what interaction have you had with the school districts integrating your research with the curriculum? Thank you, Kate, for asking that question. Right now, we are actually talking to the school districts. They're looking at revamping their entire social studies department, incorporating localized history. And one of the first places they reached out to was Shorefront. Also, the high school, their entire history department visited Shorefront to see how they can incorporate our work and our research with their curriculum as well. So yes, we're right now engaged with developing and formulating what a curriculum will look like for at least 3 key year periods, 2 elementary, 1 junior high school, and 1 high school unit at the very least to deal with that. Hinda has a question here. As someone who's researching Pilsen, I've been thinking a lot about gentrification of people of color, whitewashing of Chicagoland neighborhoods, and what it means to commemorate history while communities of color are being pushed out and demolished. What's happening with Black Evanston's gentrification, and how does this relate to preserving Black Evanston history? We are seeing that here in the 5th Ward. The 5th Ward is, I refer to the 5th Ward a lot because that's like the historic made Black community in Evanston. And right now, it's become more of the affordable areas of Evanston to develop in. So we're seeing a lot more development and new populations coming in, displacing generational Black Evanston residents. So part of trying to restabilize that and re-energize that is to focus some new focus on the area. One of them is is the project with localized reparations. And the other, we just went through an election process, and a lot of aldermen are refocusing new energy of a collective work within the 5th Ward to redevelop business districts, get a localized school back in place, revitalize and add more resources to the local community center in that area, and revitalize business district, and pushing the advent of Black homeownership and Black businesses to develop in that area. So it's been a long talk and a long haul with that. It involves entities like historical organizations like Shorefront to give the historic narrative with that, city government, and equity and empowerment commission as well, all interfacing together and talking about this localized history and what can be done to empower a community and bring it up to its former glory. So thank you again for that, that question. Dave Jones has a question. Does Shorefront interact much with other historical societies of the area, such as the Evanston Historical Society and the Dawes Mansion? Yes, we do. In fact, I was formerly a board president of that historical organization in the early 2000s, and a longtime board member and committee member of the collections department. So yes, we do interface with all of the local historical organizations throughout the North Shore, but that's why Shorefront exists, because of the lack of information they had on the localized Black communities. So we are really pushing the envelope of engaging all of these organizations to open our eyes more and look beyond what they think is local history or what's important, and rediscovering new aspects of that. One of the early things we did in Influence was working with the Lake Forest Historical Society. They had a heritage walk along the cemeteries. And it's a mixed cemetery, so Black and whites are buried there in Lake Forest. But every time they came across a Black gravesite and they had a reenactment of that person to share some history, it was always done in the slave dialect. And so I rose my hand and asked, how do you know they spoke that way? I mean, you have this family here, the Matthews family, that were business owners, and they were also domestic. Some of the family members worked as domestics for Lake Forest College president. So I doubt that, I have questioned that they may have this Southern slave dialect that you're imposing, and maybe it was something different. So with that question, they actually augmented and changed their whole narrative and changed the tonal quality of that to be more, less biased about what the perception of a person of color living in the North Shore and what they did or how they sounded. So those are things that get people to start thinking outside of the box of that and challenging some of the norms or the misconceptions that are thought about in the local area. So that's one of the big things that we do in engagement. Is Shorefront considering offering a walking tour of the heritage sites? Yes, we are. That is part of the programming of that as well. We want to design this as historic walking sites as well as self-guided tours. So as the whole program evolves and comes more fruition throughout the summer, hopefully you'll see more of that happening as far as programming that we could perform, and for those who may want to do it on their own. We want to kind of be both ways. And Tim is there also a lot of interaction between Shorefront and Northwestern University, including their library, archive departments, and even their history department? That is a growing relationship. We've been doing this for 25 years. Northwestern is actually quite a difficult community to break into, but we've had very good engagements with the archives there, as well as other departments throughout Northwestern, depending on what their focus is on. A lot of times we are engaged with the outreach department at Northwestern, where we're doing a lot of lectures with students and scholars there and graduate students who are looking to work outside of the Northwestern campus area and within the community. So they contract Shorefront to provide a lot of speaking engagement services and tours about the local Black community here in Evanston. So we're still building those relationships. One of the things I always really focus on is equitable partnerships. So sometimes what I see with big institutions, with smaller organizations, is that bigger institutions get these large grants and they get the resources behind that. And part of their partnership then engages a smaller entity, let's say like Shorefront, who are, and they're tapping our knowledge for and expertise in what we know, but we receive no funds or not part of that grant in the first place. So what we really look for are more equitable partnerships where we're at the table at the same time they're looking for those grants and incorporating other entities that they want to partner with as a beneficiary of any grant monies coming in. So it's more of an equitable, shareable, and more truistic engagement within an institution and a community and in community archives. So yes, it is a growing effort, and we keep pushing the envelope as we do it. So thank you for that question. I think that was all of them.
Yeah, we really appreciate that, Dino, and everyone asking fine questions. I know that as someone who teaches, particularly with diverse demographics, you always wonder how you can engage your students, particularly undergraduates in history. And I think your center and your colleagues have offered us some food for thought, how we might engage our students as well.
Yes, one thing we do have, I mean, with our collections, most of our collections have been processed by students.
Excellent.
So we have a good partnership with Dominican University, where we're always getting a constant flow of students, undergraduate and graduate students coming in to process collections. And what they enjoy with this, not only do they get to engage with processing and creating finding aids of a new collection, but oftentimes they get to meet the donors as well. Wow. So that interaction and engagement becomes a treasure. And 9 times out of 10, the interns that work with us, they have a set time period, to say 2-3 months. They end up working longer than that because they so enjoy working with Shorefront in these processes. And we want to make sure that our interns take ownership of their work. So we have a lot of work to do here, and we're always getting things. So I try and find out what their interests are, and I kind of like set them up like, oh, you like music? Well, we have a music collection here that we need to reprocess this. And I think you'll like this because this musician and this musician is coming in donating some more stuff, and I think you appreciate meeting them.
Great. Devin?
Yeah, Dino, I know we have in the audience several people who have volunteered for smaller historic sites and museums or served as board members or been part-time volunteers, all these things. So I wonder if you can tell us more about your board structure and what type of committees you have and how you keep this amazing place running.
Sure. So we are completely volunteer. Whoa, how's that sustainable? It really isn't, but I have a passion. We are looking at growing that differently. But throughout our history, when we first started fledgling, we had one big board, about 22 people at the most, I think, at one time. And that was unwieldy. And so we went through a process of restructuring where we split up our board into 3 boards. We have the board of directors, who have the fiduciary responsibility of Shorefront. They have the vote as well. So all the policies and practices that we do are ran by that board. That board is about 9 members. We have an advisory board, also consisting of about 9 members. And they do exactly what that is. That's where we put all the PhDers and professors and professional people on that board, because we don't want to soak up a lot of their energy and come to board meetings all the time, but tap their expertise in very specific things that may be needed. So let's say if we need to develop a contract, we'll talk to one of our advisors who's an attorney that can help us with that. If we need some scholarly advice, we could tap into our scholar and ask them specific questions, and they can engage in that way, and they're done. They don't have a vote though, but they're allowed to attend any of the board meetings and ask questions at any time. But I think what our most important board is our honorary board. And I affectionately call them the street cred crew. Because when we go out there and talk to the community, we have to engage in a certain way. But it's the community members, part of the honorary board, that can sit there in the audience and they're nudging their friends saying, this group is legitimate. Here's how I engage with them. Here's what I do with them. And they're preserving our history. And that has come a long way. And kind of give you this one story that I had. One of the early exhibits that we put up in a community center that has a lot of kids running up and down the hallways and doing things. I was installing the exhibit, and 3 or 4 adults kept coming to me saying, if you don't protect this exhibit, these kids who have no respect for anything will tear everything down. And I said, I don't believe that. And I put it up, and weeks went by, not a scratch. I go in there and talk and engage with the kids. The kids start pointing things and asking questions. So one day I removed the exhibit to go towards somewhere else. And one day I walked back into the building, the kids came up and surrounded me saying, "Why did you take our exhibit?" And I said, "The exhibit's coming back, trust me. But thank you for protecting this exhibit." And since then, I have other exhibits going in that same space, unprotected. Now, they're like flat exhibits, reproductions of things mounted on foam core on nice panels. But these kids are looking at it, reading it, and taking care of it. And that's what you see as a success in our community, that the community takes ownership of it and protects their own history. So our engagement with that, with the street cred crew and our board alignment helps with that. We are looking to hire an executive director, and we're building funds toward that. So I think somebody mentioned, how to donate. We have a corpus that we have developed for long-term funding, and it's held at the Evanston Community Foundation called the Shorefront Legacy Fund. We want to grow that fund enough where we could be self-sustaining, knowing we could hire a person and pay them a salary without risk of losing them because of grant funding cycles that go up and down. That's not sustainable either. So we want to make sure that we're able to pay a person and know they have a secure salary so they can perform the work and grow in the organization and grow in its capacity.
Great. I like the street cred board. It's
Yes.
a little more interesting than the honorary board. That sounds a little.
Yeah. And the last thing I do too, I do a annual report. And most people say that, okay, the annual report, okay, is this going to city government or some important forum? No, my annual report is addressed to the Foster Senior Club at the Fleetwood Jourdain Center. It's a membership that this organization was started in 1950. It's about 400 members strong. And even with COVID, they're coming online on Zoom, 100 members at a time, every week, every Wednesday. So even to get an appointment to present for them, I have to wait 3 months because their calendar gets filled up with presenters. I consider that my most important engagement with the community to make sure I'm doing something right. And the two things I look for in the audience is either a head shake like this or arms crossed like that. And so what I do afterwards, I always go up to the people who are cross their arms and ask them, what did I do wrong? What are we doing wrong? And how can we fix it? And that opens up a new field of engagement and assurance that we're trying to do the right thing for the community.
Well, I think we're a little over 2:30, so I'll thank Tim Draper for helping us out here, and of course Dino, amazing work up there, and really great to hear about all the things recent and the current and the future that you're working on. Folks have your contact information, and I'll just enter into the chat information about the remaining symposium sessions. We've got 3 live ones left, one at 7 o'clock tonight. The keynote with artist and landscape architect Santiago X, and then 2 tomorrow afternoon, one about monuments and memorials throughout the state, and the final one about a Lincoln Douglas documentary. All the information you need is on that link. This session has been recorded, and we'll be putting it on our YouTube website for you all to revisit and share with your friends who weren't able to make it today. So Dino, thank you again, and I hope you hear more from audience members. And I'd also like to thank, before I forget, thank Dave Jones of the ISHS board for putting you in touch and kind of bringing your work to our attention and facilitating this session to come on the program. So Dino.
Thank you so much for having me, and I hope everybody learned a lot from this, and hope and thank you again.
Great. All right. Thank you all, and I hope to see you all soon.